Now, when it comes to learning about the American Revolution, one of the most memorable and honestly bizarre for probably everyone in the early 1770s, and racy and bizarre to us, or whatever your view is on this part of history is, it did give a good point about how the British taxed on tea, hence its name and where it took place. And that is started the revolution. The Boston Tea Party. So here it is, the Revolution category of Story of America cards. The Boston Tea Party was an American political mercantile protest that occurred on December 16, 1773, by the Sons of Liberty in Boston in colonial Massachusetts. The target was over the Tea Act of May 10, 1773, which allowed the British and the East India Company to sell tea from China in American colonies without paying taxes apart from those imposed by the Townshend Acts. The Sons of Liberty strongly opposed the taxes from the Townshend Acts as a violation of their rights, and so, in response, the Sons of Liberty, with some disguised as Native Americans, destroyed an entire shipment of tea sent by the East India Company. On the night of December 16, 1773, some 8,000 disgruntled American colonists gathered in or near the Old South Church in Boston, Massachusetts, to hear what Captain Roach of the East Indian Company's tea ship, Dartmouth, had to say. Roach informed Samuel Adams, chairman of the colonists' meeting, that Governor Thomas Hutchinson had refused to send the Dartmouth back to England, as the colonists had insisted until they had paid the import tax imposed by the British government. With that, Adams gave the signal, and a group of Boston citizens, disguised as Mohawk Indians, rushed to Griffin's Wharf, crept aboard the Dartmouth and two other tea ships standing nearby, and silently dumped all the tea cargoes, 342 carts, into the Boston harbor. No other property aboard the ships were damaged, and the colonists left as quietly as they had arrived. It was, in retrospect, a small act, but it was one of the sparks that set off the American Revolution. For nearly 100 years, tensions had been building throughout the colonies settled by the Puritans in 1630. The city of Boston had spent its first as a 50 years of self-governing community. Its citizens did not react kindly, therefore, when the British royal government decided to take steps to assert its authority over the colonists during the 1680s. And in the years that followed, more acts by the crown further angered the colonists. The chief sore point was taxes. In 1764, the British had opposed a tax on sugar, and the following year brought the Stamp Act, which taxed paper of all kinds. The angered colonists flatly refused to pay it, arguing that they had no representatives in the British government. Without representation, they declared, they will not be taxed. The time was growing ripe for a showdown. Then, in April of 1773, Parliament imposed the Tea Act, which placed a duty on the favorite beverage in the colonies and created a monopoly in the tea market for the East India Company. The resentment in Boston over the new tax was so great that the colonial leaders, such as Sam Adams, called for actions. The Boston Tea Party, as it became known, was one of them. The British were furious when they learned about the dumping of the tea a few months later. They passed the Intolerable Acts of 1774, placing severe restrictions on the colonies. Then on April 19th, 1775, all shots at Lexington and Concord, just outside of Boston, the American Revolution had begun. The Boston Tea Party did leave a lasting effect on America, and therefore what we prefer is the favorite drink. I guess we can say John Adams, the second cousin of Samuel Adams, founding father, also president. He was among many Americans who considered drinking tea as unpatriotic, especially following after the Boston Tea Party, which drinking tea started to die down from there and after the Revolution. This resulted people to consider coffee as a favorite hot drink. A historian named Alfred Young, the term for the Boston Tea Party to describe the event in the Revolution's history, did not appear in print until 1834, before the name we know it was called Destruction of the Tea, according to Young. At the time, American writers were for many years apparently reluctant to celebrate the destruction of property, and so the event was usually ignored in histories of the American Revolution. But that began to change in the 1830s. However, especially with the publication of biographies of George Robert Wells Hughes, one of the few still living participants of the Tea Party, as it then became known.
The Boston Tea Party was often been referred in other political protests. When Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi led a mass burning of Indian recognition cards in South Africa in 1908, a British newspaper compared the event to the Boston Tea Party. When Gandhi met with the Viceroy of India in 1930 after the Indian salt protest campaign, Gandhi took some duty-free salt from his shawl and said with a smile that the salt was to remind us of the famous Boston Tea Party. American activists from a variety of political viewpoints have invoked the Tea Party as a symbol of protest. In 1973, on the 200th anniversary of the Tea Party, a mass meeting at Faneuil Hall called for the impeachment of President Richard Nixon and protested oil companies in the ongoing oil crisis. Afterwards, protesters boarded a replica ship in Boston Harbor, hanged Nixon's effigy, and dumped several empty oil drums into the harbor. And that's the Boston Tea Party from Story of America cards. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time in the other stuff I do, even if some of us should already know the Tea Party, depending if you're from the US.